All right, we are recording. So, good evening to all of you. And I do have a couple Delberts there for you to look at. One deals basically, if you remember, with putting the blinders on and removing the blinders from Theory U, and then what brainstorming is all about. So, I always find Delbert always seems to capture what goes on in organizations quite well. So I thought you might find those of some interest. So here's what we're going to do tonight. What I really want to spend some time on is your assumptions and your challenges that you put together, and talk about those, and then test them against some material that's out there as we look at this process. So again, going back to using the iceberg, that really when you look at your challenges and what you guys have generated up to this point, again, you're look at yourself as individuals and then collectively as a team. So these challenges really come from what you carry in your head, your experiences, etc. So I think that's something that as a leader, it particularly is important for you to really begin to look at. And so the question I want you to focus on tonight as we go through this, what are the assumptions underlying your challenge? What's the discussion within the teams that allow these challenges to emerge in their point? But as individuals, really what I want you to think about is what type of shift in thinking did you find difficult to let go of as you were doing this? And you'll see what I'm getting at as we go through this process. And again, that really lies around the idea of downloading, because when you're trying to create a change process within your organizations and in yourself as individuals, one of the most important things that you need to think about is, am I downloading the habitual habits of action or the habitual assumptions that I carry in my head around what we're dealing with and what that challenge is all about? So again, I just want to make sure that you come back to this and you process this from this point of view, that as you look at the challenges and building out that challenge, it really comes from the development of surfacing what your mental models are as it relates to the question of what this course is all about. So any comments, questions about what I've said right now? Okay, so I'm sure as we get into this, you will have some, because now what I want to get into is go back to the Puccio book, and in the beginning, right from the beginning, is that they lay out a set of assumptions related to what creative leadership is all about. And so that first assumption really is that it's a process that leads to change. So from your readings and hopefully from the videos that you've been watching, that you're getting a sense that this creativity is not something that is mysterious, but really it is a process, it is identified, and it can really lead to the change that one is looking at within an organization or what a group is looking at. So that's one of the first assumptions about creative leadership. Then followed up by what they say is that leaders then really are the catalysts for this to happen within any organization, and that you deliberately are the processors of productive change. So when you go back and you think about what you read in the Heifetz and Linsky book about that ability to understand the difference between technical and adaptive change processes, this then becomes very important in the context of creative leadership. And then they go on and basically say that really creativity is a core leadership competence. And again, that's one of the reasons it is integrated into this EDD program, because the more you get a sense of what creativity is about, the more it's going to help you in processing the concept of change within any organization to create or to innovate in order for the organization to survive and to keep moving forward. And then finally, what they talk about is the individual's ability to think creatively and to facilitate creative thinking in others can be enhanced. So again, right now, as you go through the Kelly book, looking at those lenses, the personas, that one of the purposes of that is to get you to begin to think differently about yourself as it relates to what he has learned, particularly about the innovative process in working with organizations around this globe in getting them in to develop creative products or to develop creative issues and ways to solve problems in complex organizations. So not just producing a product, but also to begin to look at the types of structural changes that might be necessary for creativity to take place. And then finally, as you develop this creative thinking and you begin to master this and you begin to promote this concept of creativity, that it's really going to help your leadership effectiveness. Now, obviously, taking a 10-week course is not going to make you a master in this. What it will do is hopefully give you the baseline to begin to think forward in relationship to, again, finding your source as a leader and how you interact with this concept of creativity and innovation. And when you go back and you think about what the book you read in 802 related to the second machine age and what's emerging out of that, this then becomes very, very important developments of your own skills for leading people in dealing with a very unpredictable and chaotic environment that most of us many times are faced with. So again, these are the assumptions that are driving the concept of creative leadership. And again, it's what drives that creative leadership book, the Puccio book, that you're all reading and going through. But it's also linked into many of the videos that you've been looking at, and also the other books, whether it be the design thinking book, the persona book, and also the motivation book. So any comments, discussion about these, or how they're interacting with your own thinking at this point? Oops. Is this, as you look at these and you think about your discussions within your own group, but more importantly, as you're doing your own self-reflectiveness, that these are probably, the major components or the assumptions that I want you to interact with as you think about yourself from the point of view of creativity. So think about what you wrote in Are You Creative? That initial foray into this. Do you think yourself as being creative? And then think about it in relationship to some of the videos that you've been looking at.
That's actually what I was going to mention. I was reflecting back after you put this up about that first just quick one-pager, because, my perception, I guess, is different, as I thought it would be, than it was in the beginning. Because there's a lot of other sides to creativity, I think, than I originally was aware of. So, and I think it's, not just on the surface, because I know in my quick one-pager, I thought of, when I think about creative, I think of flashy bulletin boards in a school and, it being really Pinterest heavy, but there's all these other kind of layers. So, yeah, I think that definitely kind of changed my point of view a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, good. It's interesting you mentioned Pinterest. My wife uses that all the time for developing creative activities and design ideas. So yeah, but it stimulates off of thinking of other people. If you think about that from that point of view. Okay, so again, I want you to keep looking at these and you know, go back to your original, and we'll talk about that as we progress, you know, how you looked at yourself at the beginning and now as you develop more of an understanding of what this process, you know, what creativity and innovation is all about. And so now tying this in terms of working towards your challenge, one of the things, again, is as we go back to this concept of you as a framework for discussion, is that you guys are involved really in co-initiating and co-sensing. So what happens as you're doing those two processes, really, when you came up with your challenge statement, you're going through a whole series of sources that I've given you. You have the Wall Street Journals, this Jeffrey Sachs stuff, all those videos, things you learned before, in order to collectively begin to look at the world from a broader sense. You know, not from that, you know, and that Delbert cartoon I had there at the beginning, you know, hey, it looks like you're really opening up, and yeah, and all I'm seeing is the parking lot and the wall of the building next door. No, what you really need to do is out of the framework, whether you're in a K-12 environment, you're in a university environment, or you're outside of education, but you're in an organization. Question is, what does this data do for you as you begin to think about the concept of a social contract to educate the next generation to make a sustainable future for our kids? So again, this data becomes extremely important for you to begin to play around with in you know, the way in which you interact with it, particularly when you think about co-initiating, listen to others and see what life calls you to do. Well, the Sharma concept says you cannot get to the co-initiating or even the co-sensing until you let go of your own downloading, that becomes the critical component of this. And so when we look at your challenges, and then I'm going to juxtaposition against it with some really forward thinking of the material that comes out of the some of those materials that I've given you, that see whether or not, you know, did you end up downloading as opposed to letting go to let come. And what he basically calls this then is basically co-presencing. You know, retreat, reflect, and allow, you know, the inner knowledge to begin to emerge. Now, what I'm going to do on the next slide is I'm going to show you a short 5-minute video of him talking about presencing, Otto Scharmer. The reason I'm going to show you this clip is that he's running the third MOOC for his Theory U. And I think I mentioned this to you guys before. And again, if you want to expand your own learning and even to have other people look at that, get out to edX and look at the material that is available free to any human being on this planet. And so he's running his third Theory U lab with his MOOC. And the first one had about 23,000. The second one had about 42,000. And this one has about 40-some thousand people around the world participating in it. So again, it's a new model of what higher education is moving towards. So you have, you know, expertise from world-class learners integrating into this process. But what's more important, and what I want you to get to, is understanding this idea of letting go to let come through presencing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the short video for you. Make sure that you're muted so it does not feed back into you when I run this.
The last 2 weeks, we started our journey down the left-hand side of the U, which is basically a journey of getting beyond downloading, of connecting with our deeper capacities to sense, and of beginning to listen with our mind and hearts wide open. This week, we'll be focusing on the bottom of the U, a part of the process that we call presencing. What happens during this stage is often also referred to as passing through the eye of the needle. The eye of the needle is the name of a gate in ancient Jerusalem. And when a fully loaded camel kind of approached that gate, the only way of passing through was that the camel driver had to take off all the bundles in order for the camel to kneel down and to pass through. And like in ancient Jerusalem, the traveler was forced in a way to let go of everything that wasn't essential in order to pass through. Many of us, many of the change makers that are around today face challenges that call on us, that require us to let go everything that isn't essential in order to step through the gate to emerging future possibility. In fact, this is exactly what Henry David Thoreau was trying to do when he came here to Walden Pond. We are here at the side of his cabin, where he spent 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days of his life in order to exactly focus on that threshold in his life. And here are the words that he used to describe what he was trying to do when he came here. He said, "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived." So he basically said, I came here because I wanted to confront, to meditate the essential facts of life. And then, while connecting kind of with my own kind of deeper purpose, have more clarity in what it is that I want to bring into the world. And that really is the essence of what the bottom of the U process or moment is all about. You remember when we started the U Lab, at the very beginning, we showed you this astronaut video clip where, we went out to the moon, kind of looking to the stars, and then the camera turned around. And people were struck and in awe and shocked by what they saw, the beauty of planet Earth. And what we said is that's really in essence what the U journey is about. That we contemplate both the world, but also the emerging self that is coming into being as we go onto this journey. And when you forget about all the concepts around the U process and the U theory and all the terms and terminology around that, and straight go to the essence. What is the essence at the bottom of the U? What is, when you look at the U theory as a framework, what is the deepest assumption that whole framework is based upon? That deepest assumption is something very simple. It's this: that each of us is not one, but two. Each human being and each community is not one self, but two. One is the current self, that is the result of our journey of the past. And the other one is the emerging future self, my highest future possibilities that I could step into, that I could actualize in my journey forward. And what the essence of the U process and the essence of presencing is all about, and really the essence of that bottom of the U experience, is that these two selves begin to listen to each other, whether or not an airplane is flying by. So that we disregard the noise that's around us and really hone into that, what's most essential, the most essential facts of life. And what is life all about? It's the world and it's the self. And the self has these two key elements: who I am today, my current self, and my emerging future self, my highest future possibility. in making these two selves beginning to listen to each other really is the essence of what this part of the journey is all about, that we want to take a deep dive into this week.
So, let me ask a question. And I want you to just reflect on this for a couple minutes. So how does this relate to what you were or are experiencing within your team as you started playing around with coming up with your challenge?
Well, I think in my group, we're all from different backgrounds. We're from special ed and higher ed and elementary and from business. And so we're all coming together really nicely. But in the beginning, we all had to kind of let go of what we were thinking so that we could be open to what everyone else was suggesting.
Okay. Another way of thinking about this is, what did you hear him say at the bottom of the U?
So like in regards to you finding really two of yourself, is that kind of what you're referencing? How like, you know, there's, or
yeah. What did you hear him say?
So what I kind of take from it is that I found it to be important really when thinking about giving feedback. So in kind of a backwards way, like I needed to put aside my opinions and kind of my perspective, and not give feedback that was necessarily emotional, but that was more objective, and kind of considered other places. So that's kind of how I took this side of it. It was a little bit different, because, you know, we're still in like the thinking stage. And if you give feedback maybe in a way that's unkind or too harsh, then automatically you turn off. So, you know, I kind of think about it in that light.
Yeah, almost from, if you remember in Theory U, you learned about types of conversation, that it becomes a debate. And what a debate does is there's winners and losers. Okay, good.
I guess I'll comment from our team standpoint. I found myself in an interesting position because I have a pretty deep background in the creative space for what I've been doing over the past 10 years. And however, my experience is not in the K through 12 area, but I'll say in the front lines. I'm actually working with students directly. I was on the school board, not being in administration, not being a teacher. I'm a higher ed teacher. And trying to look at this and understand my team members from one, we're doing a classroom assignment, to each of us has our own aspirations or dreams that we want to see happen in life. And then three, how do we align those? And what ended up happening was really pretty interesting, is that we started to move forward, meaning that we hit this point of reflection over the weekend, Monday, last night. And it started to come together where we're looking out at what things can be versus where we're coming from. And it's interesting to watch it happening.
Okay, good. Because one of the things, you know, and it's kind of interesting, and what I want you to do is, do not think about this, even though it is, as an assignment. Think about it as I created a learning space for you to play with ideas and to get a sense of what this stuff is in a learning space to explore the ideas. And I think that, that's an assumption that I have in relationship to creating this, and I don't see it more as an assignment, as a process to help you to explore applications of things that you're hearing about, seeing, and reading about. And I think that's important. And also, as you said, drawing it from my own experience, and I like the word aspiration, that we all have these different aspirations, but also look at those aspirations as part of the mental models that you bring together around a challenge that this space kind of lays out for you in terms of as educational leaders, and again, not in traditional K-12 or higher ed or training environments and organizations, but more importantly is that how do we meet the needs of students? And actually what I should put in there and change that word, how do we meet the needs of our learners in this emerging world of the 21st century? And so I think, as you think about that process, and then you think about what Otto was talking about in terms of the bottom of the U, is that the key you have to constantly remember is, and think about the self, your own self and others, that the deeper the change that we're beginning to explore, the greater amount of new learning is going to be required, and that you're going to get more resistance. Because that's what Heifetz and Linsky and his crew was basically saying, that the more change takes place, the more it causes us to let go in order to let come, that from a leadership point of view, and that's why their original book they wrote was called, Leadership on the Line, is that leadership can be rather dangerous. So you think about all the great leaders in the world over time, what they've had to go through at what expense and what's happened to them. Because any great change or any movement always is going to meet any type of resistance, because it's not that people don't want to deal with it. It requires a deeper sense of learning and letting go. And it's hard to let go with what we're familiar with and we feel secure with. So these two concepts, or at least that concept, I think is extremely important. And at times it can be kind of counterintuitive when you think about it in your own experiences, that this is really the problem. That when someone says, hey, why do we have to change? Well, that's an okay question to ask. Because what it allows you to do as a leader is, okay, to get into helping to understand. So generative or co-sensing, help me to understand what your feeling is about this, what you see, etc. That's part of the leadership process. So as you think about what you put together, I want you to keep that in mind, because again, what I ask you to do in this space is really, with your team, is to look at the issues. I'm giving you a lot of stuff. And the question then is, each one of you as individuals and collectively, to do this, then you got to identify what's the critical stuff that's coming out of this wide variety of material I've given you, that really this generation that is, what it's facing, and what future generations are going to possibly have to deal with because of certain present realities, and how do we need to think about this to live in the future. So that was your first task, as you're going through this. Second one, and it's really to come up with, common sense. And as you said, my team got together and, we started thinking about this because we came from different backgrounds, and we kind of started to blend this together to play with this. But to do that, so you start from your point of view, and then you go into the co-sensing. Then you let go. You get to the point of view of not debating, but you get from the point of view of asking, help me to understand where you're coming from. That becomes the language in order to develop this. And the reason I'm putting this out is that if you're going to utilize this type of activity within your own work, that ability to understand the type of language and the questions to ask people becomes very critical and feeling to give them a sense that this is an open environment in which you can talk about things. And then the third task is, okay, come up with what the challenge is for the team, and how will the challenge be approached. So that's where we are right now. And what I want to do is take a look at, what each team has said as their preliminary challenges. So I'm going to go through these real quick. So is someone from Team 1 on board there? And do you want to talk about what this is, where it came from? This is Team 1's. Hopefully it's Team 1's.
What did you want us to address?
I just want you to talk, tell the rest of us, okay, what you're doing here with this challenge.
Okay, yeah, so basically, we see a future, kind of like we learned last quarter, a future where digital technology has completely changed the landscape of the workforce. And so we asked ourselves, well, what students need to know for the future is going to be different, but yet at the same time, working professionals are probably also going to be interested in honing their skills in such a way that they become better professionals. So we thought the best way to approach that would be a collaboration between adult learners who are currently working in industry and students in an environment where they can not only learn side by side, but also kind of be in a symbiotic relationship with one another, where the student learns from the person with experience in the field, but then the person in the field also gets a better sense of the talent and the qualities of the new generation that will be eventually coming in to work with them. And this is going to take place in our mind at this point yet in our brainstorming. We've got like kind of a high school setup where half of the day is going to focus on, learning about their interests and things like that. And then the other half, the students can take a more individualized learning path that focuses instead of on discrete subjects like social studies, math, science, but interesting work, vocational related courses, but I don't want to use the word vocational, courses that involve multiple disciplines. Because we think that might create a level of flexibility in students that we don't necessarily see today. You have a lot of high school students who don't necessarily even understand that project management is a potential career because that's not a class that they take in high school. So we think this kind of approach would better prepare students for the future, but also work for adults in industry.
Okay, good. So what I'm going to do is I have each team just talk about those. And I just want to get these out here and for you to say these, because what I'd like you to go back when I put this up on the YouTube is to go back and listen to just what you said based upon what I'm going to give you to kind of juxtaposition this against some other concepts. All right, so very good. I like what you guys did there, as you begin this. So let's go to Team 2. So someone from Team 2. Want to just talk about what we have here? Hopefully this is Team 2's.
Okay, I'll talk about it because I wrote it. So, it's interesting actually that we kind of were throwing around a similar idea to Team 1. So we're considering how do we start at the top in regards to high school graduation requirements and have multiple pathways. So it's not just a diploma, a certificate, but we're also considering adding an apprenticeship pathway so that students can again leave with kind of not just college or career ready, but also some kind of honestly, it is a vocation. The world needs plumbers and carpenters and paralegals. Like, we need all of these things. And so we're looking at changing the course requirements which is a big undertaking because they're not just something that the schools decide, but it's requires a lot of hoop jumping from other legislation so that, again, students can have their own choice in their education in the hopes that it prepares them for the future. We see a lot of benefit. We see a lot of outcomes both for the students and then on the fiscal side of things, so that if we spend a little bit of extra time, students even with disabilities technically have until 21 to go to school. So if we use all of that time for some of those students, we might be in a much better position fiscally so that they're not as dependent on the government as if we use all of that time well. So that's kind of where we were going.
Okay. All right, good. So again, what I want you to do is, after I kind of juxtaposition this against some other material, I want you to think about this, of what I'm hearing, and I don't want you to answer this. What I'm hearing though is that you're still dealing with requirements that are being laid upon you from the outside. That within your group is seems to be a powerful indicator. And the question that you want to think about is, well, how do we get rid of that? Is that really what we want? So again, you're creating something different. But I think the concepts you have there are good, and I want you to look at this from this initial feedback to, okay, well, what are we going to do? Can we pull this out? Same thing with Team 1. When you use the word high school, is high school an appropriate terminology or a structural concept that's going to make sense in the future? So I just want you to think about that. So moving along, Team 3, which I just got today because George sent it to me, and I must have lost the email, honestly, but thank you for sending this back to me. So Team 3, you want to talk about this?
Well, I guess I'll follow Virginia's lead since I put this draft together, and my team members may chime in. We came out with this reality of where we are, what we'll call the new normal, and realizing that we individually have to become, to use a business term, our own profit centers for sustainability, for us to be able to take care of ourselves, with the thought being that there may not be enough jobs to give gainful employment for people to be able to take care of themselves the way we traditionally have done it. So looking at this normal, we felt that we wanted to, we believe we want to create this self-sustaining individual that has a sense of awareness, so they have certain skills that they can bring into a situation, whether it be a marketplace, society, or whatever, and they have what they need to stand on their own rather than being dependent on others. So it's building up this independent individual, so they can take a creative mindset and use it at multiple levels at various points in their lives. And we looked at this, just looked at what's going on with the gig economy, the entire freelance world that's not just evolving, but it's becoming a larger and larger component of our workforce. People realizing there's certain things they want, freedom in life and so forth, but we were looking at basic life needs. How do you take care of yourself as being one of the key drivers here? And we were looking at part 1, really plugging this into the charter school model at the K through 12 area. So it's something that we can prototype sooner than later and connect that to higher educational centers that focus on creativity, let's say entrepreneurship and design. And those are 2 paths of least resistance for a shorter term impact. And then the longer term part, obviously, would be our goal was whatever we design is to cannibalize the current system with what the results are of this new system. We haven't gotten that far yet.
Okay, good. So, and I'm thinking about this as you were talking about this, future economies. Also, when you draw upon, the second machine age and some of the material I gave you in that if that world is changing, and I'm going to make a statement now, when you look at the discourse in our present society and where it is right now, has have any of your teams, and you don't need to answer, I'm just throwing this out for you to think about, is where does the concept of social contract come into play? And think about it from when Sharma was talking about open mind, open heart, and open will. And then think about those divides, self to nature, self to self, and self to others. That in all of these, I'm getting a sense that, something's going to change. And obviously we got to think about this. So the question is, how will you become very explicit in saying, what does that future look like, that we might definitely need based upon current reality of what we're seeing, but more importantly is, what are all of these things stating, not just from an economic point of view, but from a humanitarian point of view or from a humanism point of view. And I don't mean, secular humanism. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what it is to be a human being. So I want you to keep that in mind, because what I want to do now is, so all three of your teams have put out in the public what the statement is and what your thinking is. So here's what I want you to do right now is that we want to see how this goes up against. And hopefully you looked at that knowledge work stuff that I have in there, because that folder is very important for you to think about, because knowledge work, and if you want to go out to their website, just Google knowledge work, because they are doing some phenomenal stuff as it relates to education. What I've given you there is these things. So here's what they're talking about that's going to happen to education very near future, and it's called democratized startup. And so really what they're saying, and you have these slides or you can get this stuff out of there, but really what they're saying is that a new open society and, the infrastructure will disseminate, practical know-how about entrepreneurship and startups, creating transformational networks that match investment and collective economic and social impact. So when you begin to think about, and I was just reading today about, what's happening to grocery stores, the physical space of grocery stores, because of what stores now, you can buy all your groceries online, have them come to your house, etc., that it's changing whole different approaches, and new entrepreneurial startups are working around this new sense of not necessarily what one would call organizational structures, but networks. So the question that you need to begin to think about is, as we go more towards network-based societies, what they're talking about is this is what's going on in society, in economics, and they call the second thing called high-fidelity living, which basically is deeper insight into understanding brain processes and cognition and what we're learning about learning and motivation. So when you look at the Daniel Pink material and how he definitely challenges a lot of the present motivational tactics, particularly using K-12, that we're learning more about cognition, and because of technology, cognitive assistants are going to be the major component. So even with the new Siri and with Cortana or whoever that other person is we're going to see more of this taking place, and it's going to have a major impact in the learning environment. So when you begin to look at how we're going to structure learning, not so much in the traditional role of teacher, but with these cognitive assistants, and then look at that, what is it, ABC School for preschool kids, and how that's taking off. It's changing a whole dimension of what learning is, but a lot of this now is coming out of our understanding of the cognitive sciences, and that's where VR is starting to come into play, et cetera. So I want you to think about, all right, how does this high fidelity living play into this? Then to deinstitutionalizing production. And so what they're basically saying is that the shift from the workforce to a talent cloud will occur. So when you begin to look at some of these job apps that are out there where for employers, it will seek through and look at and definitely match the talent pools that you're looking at through the cloud. And, organizations are now going to rely on global networks of independent talent to match specialized skills. So this idea of working for one company for your entire lifetime probably is not going to exist for possibly the next generation, but their kids. So again, what does this mean to us in terms of education? And we'll get to that in a couple minutes. So we're also saying customized value webs. So what you're beginning to see is what begins to bring your own devices movement, very, very well in turn to create your own school movement. New intermediaries, learning agents, parents, you're starting to see that. I mentioned to you about that MOOC that I showed, that one video clip that Otto's doing, and where he has impacted over 100,000 people worldwide, and that these people are creating these new physical spaces in their own geographical areas where people get together. But look at how YouTube, TED.com, all of these things are really major information purveyors today. So what they're saying is that this customizable value webs are going to take place. And the question is, does the static physical space of how our traditional schools are set up, whether it be K-12 or universities, how are they going to have to change to deal with those realities? And then what they talk about is this concept of shareable cities, where successful cities will be those that increasingly turn to open governance, a whole different way in which we're going to, deal with citizen engagement. And I'll tell you right now, with the debate in our society right now, the relationship between police and communities, et cetera, are sort of the conversations that are beginning to emerge. What is transparency? What is civil engagement all about? What is social welfare? What will that be all about? So again, when you think about the healthcare issues in this country, how is this going to impact our next generation? And as educators, how do we need to begin to think about these ideas that are well researched and are the trends that are emerging that we need to think about in terms of our educational process? So what School Knowledge Work sees is that these are the 5 disruptors. And then if you look at Clayton Christensen and his work out of Harvard, you can see a whole series of other ones that tie into this quite a bit. So with these disruptions then, when you think about yours, what they begin to ask about is, all right, what does this mean for education? So what they're seeing is that schools are going to take many forms. Sometimes they will be self-organized. So you already mentioned, I think, what Team 3 said, well, we're kind of thinking on the charter school concept. Well, charter schools in their pure form were designed to allow for experimentation in relationship to getting rid of a lot of regulations and all those things. But what happens is that we still download what schools should be from our own past. But what's beginning to emerge, you're going to see a lot of self-organizing around schools because of the use of the technology, et cetera. So that's one thing they're talking about that's going to take place. Second thing is that learners and their families will create individualized, learning playlists reflecting particular interest goals and values. It's not going to be standardized curriculum anymore. It isn't going to be that way. It's going to be, there'll be a set of knowledge base that you will explore and you'll go through, but the idea is that individuals finding who they are, and if you remember any of the Young Zhao videos, that's basically what he's saying is going to start happening, and we almost need that type of environment if we're going to create the type of world to prepare our kids to work in an entrepreneurial world. So the third thing they say is that whatever the path, radical personalization will become the norm. So with learning approaches and supports tailored to each learning. So those of you who teach special ed and you understand that, the IEP to one extent was the beginning of that. But that was law that said because we never took care of these kids before 1975, 76, special ed kids were always, second-class citizens. Well, we're going to create these personalized, learning. But now what's happening with Khan Academy and that ABC schools beginning to emerge, that's what you're going to see. That's going to be the norm. That's the emerging norm. And as more and more parents interact with that, I'm thinking about if I'm a superintendent of schools and I got a whole mess of parents in my community that have their kids working on this, and they come into a traditional kindergarten session or first grade, and these kids are so far advanced, what's going to be the conversation that emerges out of that? Next one is that educational jobs will diversify as many new learning agents. Roles will emerge to support learning. So again, one of the things I've asked you to look at as you get into your prototypes, how's the system of work going to change? Is the traditional teacher still going to be in a traditional sense? Or is there going to be something different? So what was it, Team One talking about, blending with experts within the field coming in and working? Well, how does the job, the educator's job, change? Not the teachers, the educator's job, as they're saying, is that you're going to see much more diversification. When you begin to look at the MOOCs that are out there and you're seeing non-educators being educators because of the expertise they have in a particular field, that's going to change the direction. So the question is, does a teacher migrate towards what I call, and I call myself this, the learning facilitator, because that's what they're going to do, is create these environments for these new learning agents to interact with the learner. And then what they say is that wide variety of digital networks and platforms. So I think that's going to be there. We're going to see more and more. Virtual reality is radically going to change the way in which we teach science and we teach mathematics and we teach the humanities, etc., as these things come together. And then at the same time, obviously, geographical virtual communities will take place, ownership all over the place. And I mean, Otto's MOOC, I can interact with the hubs in China and Africa and Asia, where no matter where they are, and all I have to do is connect with these people and say, hey, I got this class doing these things, and I do have this up there, so the stuff you're creating will be shared with people around this world. As you explore these different types of ideas, this is what's happening now and will continue to happen. And the other issue is credentialing. So the traditional 4-year bachelor's or the PhD or the EDD, they're going to be different. We're going to have more certificates. We're going to have credentials. We're going to have badges. Where there's going to be many different ways to reflect what you know and how you demonstrate material. And again, through their research, KnowledgeWorks saying that these are the trends that are emerging. They seem to be coming together. So the question is that, given these trends, what might the future of learning become? So when you look at the material in that KnowledgeWorks folder I have, or you download the slides and take these 2 slides, I really want you to look at these within your team and then now say, okay, here's where our conversation has been. We've looked at some of the stuff, the SAC stuff. I'm making the assumptions. You looked at all that stuff, things we've learned in the past, videos. Now, what does this do to our thinking? Is our challenge robust enough to say it is something that is going to reflect more of this and try to break away from the traditional structures that we're in right now? So let me say, I forget which my next slide is. I want to see. Yeah, so to just continue this and just look at this, and I have all these for you. So this is what they're saying the learner's going to be. I'll just let you look at those, but obviously you can look at this in more detail later. So look at number 3, seek out and work with mentors, peer learning groups, digital and human learning agents, interacting with that. So to one extent, in my kind of feeble way, I'm trying to get that to happen even in this particular program. when your mentors you're working with to one extent are the videos you're looking at, your peer learning group are your teams, what you're going to be sharing, and then other types of agents that you might want to explore. So again, this is what the learner in the future is going to be all about. And again, you have all this stuff, so you don't have to write it down. But I want you to kind of now take your challenge, juxtaposition against this. So here's what the learning agents are. And this is a lot of stuff you looked at in 802. Look at the third one, cultivate their own entrepreneurial skills using public-private resources. So I think some of you understand this and you're working with it. I think, George, you've talked about this, that this is what you're doing. You're trying to get your students, and it's interesting if you're a school board member, well, how do you take this and get a K-12 school to begin to understand this and begin to think about this? Because this is going to be the reality. Might not be exactly what this stuff is, but it's going to emerge. This is what learning's going to be because of these things we're looking at, and then what the ecosystem's all about. So take a look at a couple of those. Create and cultivate structures by using mechanisms such as community design, game mechanics, diverse pay, new types of reward system, intrinsic motivation to encourage collaboration. Working again, that's why I mentioned to you, what about social contract? How are we teaching, the concept of the social contract, what that means? What does it mean to be part of a collaborative group? Establish transparent, meaningful, and accessible reporting, formative and summative performance data at levels of a learning ecosystem. So, how are our students going to demonstrate understanding, not just passing standardized tests for right and wrong answers, but really be able to demonstrate their thinking in complex situations. So I want you to look at these up against your challenges that as you're looking at them at this point. So this is really what I want you guys to look at, because this is very, very powerful information. This is a highly credible group. As I say, go out to the website, take a look at the material. They've updated this material, but generally what I have there is pretty good. So any thoughts, comments right now based upon this onslaught of information? I'm looking at all your faces. For those of you who have your cameras on. So you have a sense of what I want you to do now. So you got your baseline challenge, and I've really given you a lot of information that's really focused on some of the societal issues related to learning, and then some of the things that are there. And I'd like you to kind of get in there now and begin to talk about that challenge, because that challenge is how you're going to design your initial prototype. And I'll give you more information about that, towards the, in my Sunday announcement. So,
hello.
Yes, go ahead.
This is Israel.
Yes.
I couldn't. I'm calling with my phone. So, with what you have said, that means we need to engage the whole community, the parents, then the whole community through project-based learning.
That could be one possibility. Just saying that that's something you need to talk about based upon that framework that I've just given you.
Okay.
So what you do, what you're going to do then within your teams is, okay, so what assumptions underlie your present assumption or your challenge. So take a look at what you have, and your challenges are pretty good, what you have there. But what I want to do is, and I'm going to tell you this now, is I want you to go beyond some of the language you're using, like high school. Well, yeah, high school, maybe we're going to have a different type of concept with that. Or how does that community interact? How is time there? Are we going to have traditional schedules? Or are we going to have something different? So I want to push you a little bit into the innovative, creative side of this, because what I want you to then think about as you look at this is then how do your assumptions create the structures that allow for the daily routines to take place? And then what behaviors are you going to see over time? And then begin, and then finally what you can basically say is, give me an example of an action that we would see. So I want you to break away from current reality. I don't care what the legislators are saying right now, because as educators and as leaders, we have an obligation to say to legislators that, wait a second, guys, if you keep this structure going, here's what's going to happen to our kids. We're going to leave them behind. So don't let that hold you back. Don't worry about the current reality right now. Okay?
Okay.
So the assumptions then, new patterns of relationships among people. Think about that. New organizational structures. Try to break out of your present thought patterns of the structure. And what I'm going to do is I will do a little, I'm going to do what do I want to call it? A voice thread for you that I'm going to put up there to show you a total redesign that when I was a superintendent that I did that got that school to break down all the walls. So I'll show you the structural aspects that I had people play around with. I didn't force them into it. I just said, hey, here's new information. And over a 3-year period of time, this group of teachers really bought into it, and I gave them the freedom to explore it, and this is what they did. They came up with new patterns of relationships, new organizational structures, and they started rethinking what teaching and learning is all about. So again, I'm giving you a little bit more concrete information to think about your challenge, so when you develop your prototype, you'll be able to address some of these. Again, you have all this in the PowerPoint PDF I gave you. Comments, questions on what I've given you here?
So we need to build a transformational networks, right?
Pardon me, Israel?
So we need to build transformational networks to break the current structure.
Yeah, I'd like you to, all I'm asking you is look at your challenge. Does it have a sense that it's more current as opposed to breaking down the current structure? That's all I'm asking you. All I want you to think about. Now, obviously, I have a set of assumptions that there are parts of it that are trapping you in the old model, and I'm trying to get you to break out of that old model. I want you to start with that. But these are the components that I think you need to think about and to let yourself free. Let yourself say, whoa, okay, we're going to think about this different. We're not, school's going to be continuous. There's not going to be, a school year. It's going to be totally different. Time's going to be different. Kids are going to work differently. That's what I want you to kind of push toward. Now, what you're going to do, though, towards the end is say, okay, how do we move the present structure towards what we're going after? And I will have some videos of past class prototypes so you get a sense of what I'm getting at. I'll get those posted up in weeks. Okay? So, again, go back to that should be ACOF, not DD. Where's the D in the F? See, the F is right next to the D. That's ACOF and Greenberg. So if you go back to that, if you remember the book, Learning Right Side Up, basically what he's saying is, and I want you to go back to this, is the idealized design of a system, is design of a system which its designers would replace the existing system right now as though it was free to replace it with any system they wanted. Because that's critical to innovation. That's critical to your ability to break out of the downloading structure. And I want you to fight that and even fight me with it as you explore it. And let yourself free with this. Don't worry about legislators or what that is. I want you to drive this based upon what you're researching about what experts are saying the future is going to look like. And you got a good start with the challenges.
Great.
And then once we get into this, finally, what you're going to basically do is from this co-presencing you're going to go into then is really you're going to do your co-creating. That's what your prototyping is going to be. And then you're co-evolving. You're really going to begin to look at this innovative ecosystem to see what it is. But more importantly, what I want you to play around with is, and keep focused on this ability to go between divergent and convergent thinking while you're doing this. Let yourself free with the divergent component. Don't, kind of break away from what the present structure is to explore new ideas. And as I said to you, that's what that super school project was all about. That's what Ken Robinson's new project on redesigning schools is all about. This is what they're looking for. And actually, your team could create something that literally could allow this to truly happen, to become actualized. I'm dead serious about that. So I think, yes, I am. I'm at the end of that. So comments, questions that you need to ask me right now?
So I'm wondering, could you speak a little bit about the self-analysis that's coming up?
Okay, what do you want to know?
Oh, I don't know. What do you want to share? I mean, it's just kind of...
You have 10 faces, right? You have 10 faces.
Right.
Look at those. Have you identified those that are like you?
Yeah, ish.
Okay. And have you identified some that, I'm really not?
Yep.
That's what you're doing.
Okay, just literally that simple. I didn't know if I should be
Yeah. All I want you to do is kind of do a self-analysis. Have you taken a Myers-Briggs before or something?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, what's a Myers-Briggs tell you?
Well, it's been a minute, but
No.
I mean, I haven't changed a whole hell of a lot since the last time I probably took one. So
Okay, but again, it's a self-analysis.
my areas of strength and right.
Yeah. So, but what we're doing it is through the lens of innovation, based upon one of the leading innovators, in this country or in the world, actually.
Okay.
That's all it is.
Okay, and you don't have any set kind of format that you'd like?
No, I say you can do it in a voice thread or anything like that. But I found that people who do voice thread or prezzies can do it pretty easily as long as the voice that you have voice in it that you're explaining it.
Right.
Okay?
Sure. Yeah, that flows pretty naturally.
Yeah.
Okay. Easy enough.
Anything else? You have a pretty good sense of what you need to do now.
Yep.
Okay, cool. That was one person said yeah, so that's okay.
Yeah, Israel said it. Okay.
Israel's, he's speaking for the entire class. I love it.
And George and the rest of the team, they are doing a great job too.
That's good.
Yeah.
So as your team thinks about this, call me, text me, or whatever. Or if you meet, you want me to come in to your group, tell me, and I'll come into your group. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So that's it for tonight. Then I'll put the recording up as soon as I'm done and it downloads, and then as I said, now I want you to analyze your challenges based upon the material I've just given you and see what it does to you in terms of your teams. Think about that. I am looking for kind of innovative stuff. I'm going to challenge you to do that. Not going to tell you how to do it. I'm just going to say, okay, if you think what you're coming up with is good, then we'll deal with it and put it out there and see how people react to it. Okay?
Okay.
That's it. I'm going to turn off the recording.